You know, the book of Revelation. Just saying the name conjures up all these wild images, right? Epic battles, strange beasts, the end of the world as we know it. But what if we've kind of been missing the point all this time? What if the real key to this thing isn't about predicting our future, but about understanding our past? So let's just dive right in and see how the very first readers actually tried to unpack the opening lines of one of history's most mysterious books.
Okay, first things first, we gotta reset our brains on one word: apocalypse. Today, you hear apocalypse and you think disaster, catastrophe, the absolute end. But the original Greek word, apocalypsis, means something totally different. It just means an unveiling. It's not about destruction, it's about disclosure. It's about pulling back the curtain to show you something that's been hidden from view. And a 6th century bishop, Apringius of Beja, he absolutely nailed this. He saw the book not as some brain teaser for us to solve, but as a direct, divine revelation. The whole idea was, look, you can't figure this stuff out on your own. Your normal senses can't grasp these truths. They have to be unveiled for you.
So if it's an unveiling, what's it, unveiling? Well, for a lot of the early commentators, like the great historian Bede, this wasn't just a book about the last 2 weeks of planet Earth. No, they saw it as a grand roadmap, a chart for the entire journey of the church, from the very beginning all the way to its final destiny. It's a story about the long haul, not just the final moments.
And that brings us to the first big puzzle on page 1. Who is this cosmic roadmap actually for? The book starts like a letter, addressed to 7 specific churches, and that immediately got its earliest readers scratching their heads. So let's see how they crack that code.
So the book opens as a letter, and it's addressed to 7 churches. The number 7, this number is everywhere in Revelation, and it all starts right here.
And that raised a really obvious question that bugged the early interpreters. I mean, if this is a universal message about the fate of the entire world and the whole church, why would you send it to just a handful of congregations in what we now call Turkey? It seems really specific, doesn't it?
Well, the answer they came up with was symbolic. Apringius argued that 7 isn't meant to be a literal number here, it's a symbol for completeness. Think about it. The 7 days of creation make up one complete week. So the 7 churches represent the one complete church. The big takeaway for them was, this letter isn't just for those folks back then, it's for everyone, everywhere, for all time.
Okay, so the audience is everyone. Got it. But the next layer of the puzzle is right there in the opening greeting, grace to you and peace. And believe me, the early readers saw something incredibly profound hidden in that simple little phrase. A guy named Andrew of Caesarea, another 6th century bishop, he didn't just see a hello. No, he saw a formal introduction from what he called the tri-hypostatic deity, which is a very fancy theological way of saying the Christian Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
And this is how they decoded it, which is actually kind of brilliant. Andrew mapped the 3 parts of this mysterious phrase directly onto the 3 persons of the Trinity. Who is points to the Father, echoing God's famous line to Moses, I am who I am. Who was points to the Son, the Word who existed from the beginning. And who is to come, that's the Holy Spirit, the one who continually visits the church.
But just as you think you've solved one puzzle, another one pops up. The greeting also sends peace from the 7 spirits who are before his throne. And this little phrase, it created a huge fork in the road for interpreters.
So on one side, you've got thinkers like Apringius again, who said, look, this is just another symbolic 7. It's talking about the one Holy Spirit who just happens to have a 7-fold power. But on the other side, commentators like Oecumenius took it way more literally. They argued these are 7 actual angels who serve God. And this just shows you early Christian thought was a lively ongoing debate, not just one single opinion.
So now, the greeting starts to zero in on the central figure of the whole book, Jesus Christ, and it gives him 3 really powerful titles. Each one is like another brushstroke, painting this incredibly complex portrait for the reader.
First up, the faithful witness. Apringius saw this as a direct reference to Jesus' 2 natures, human and divine. The idea is that in his human life, and especially in his death, he gave a perfect testimony, a faithful witness to his own divine identity. His humanity was literally the proof of his divinity.
And the historian Eusebius gives us this incredible real-world context for this. He wrote that the early Christian martyrs, they actually refused to be called witnesses. Now, the Greek word for witness is martys, where we get our word martyr, but they reserved that title, witness, with a capital W, for Christ alone. They said, no, we're just confessors. He's the real witness.
The next title is The Firstborn of the Dead, and for the early believers, this was the ultimate promise. Christ wasn't just some guy who came back to life. No, he was the first to truly conquer death itself, becoming the blueprint, the source code for the resurrection of everybody else.
And man, the early church fathers found so much meaning packed into this one phrase. For Oecumenius, it meant Christ kicked off the resurrection for everyone who would follow. For Athanasius, he was our guide, the one who literally opened up the path to heaven. And Bede, he took it even further, saying this firstborn status was so powerful it even applied backwards in time, to the faithful who lived and died before Jesus was even born.
Then this opening passage builds to a climax with a series of titles that are probably some of the most famous in the entire Bible, and they claim a truly cosmic scope. I am the Alpha and the Omega. I mean, what is simple, elegant metaphor? Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet, Omega is the last. The message is crystal clear. Christ bookends everything. He's there at the start of the story, and he's there at the very end.
And Augustine of Hippo, he just summarized this duality so beautifully. He said, think of it this way. As the Alpha, the Creator, he's the reason you exist at all. But as the Omega, the Redeemer, he's the reason you can live forever. He's not just the beginning of life, he's the whole point of its end.
And finally, the title, the Almighty. Now, for theologians like Athanasius, this was a huge deal. At a time when there were fierce debates about who Jesus really was, calling him Almighty, a title usually saved for God the Father, was this bold, powerful statement that the Son and the Father share one single, indivisible divine power.
And just to add one last little layer of mystery to the whole thing, these early commentators couldn't even agree on when the book was written. Some, like Apringius, thought John was exiled and wrote Revelation way back in the middle of the 1st century, under the Emperor Claudius. But others, like Bede, followed a totally different tradition that had happened much later, near the end of the century, under the Emperor Domitian.
So after seeing how these very first readers decoded just the opening lines, from symbols and numbers to hidden formulas about the Trinity, we're kind of left with this big question, aren't we? Do these ancient keys really give us the definitive answer to unlocking Revelation, or do they instead unveil something even deeper about how we, as human beings, have always searched for meaning, for symbols, and for a divine roadmap in the most mysterious texts we have?